Hi there. The black gloves are back for another build for you tonight. We've got something new here. The MechaTrellis 4x4 button driver board to do a lot of things with this, but you could make a grid of buttons out of this. So we'll show you how to assemble this and make it all go. So we've got a couple of driver boards, but first let me show you some extras that come along here that we're going to need. These little PCBs are going to be used to join the boards together, and then we're also got some little headers that'll be in the kits that you're going to want to use. So let's see. First thing you want to do is get a pair of pliers, have a pair of pliers or something, because we're going to look at these pin headers first and then break some stuff off the other boards. So for the pin headers, we want to make a little spacer device here. We're kind of going out of order, I guess, but for this, grab the pin headers you get and take out the middle pin and grab your pliers just kind of with your fingers, grab the other side, and pull out the middle pin, so you'll end up with a little sort of U-shaped guy like this. I have a couple of more that I made before, and we're going to use those to space the boards a little bit. So let's set those aside for a second. Next thing is the little joiner PCBs. These come just on one PCB. You're going to want to basically break off this end piece with a pair of pliers, or you can use some flush cutters to cut them off like that. Pliers probably work pretty good just to break them off all at once, and that should just snap off. Same thing on this side. You might break them off, grab it with the pliers like that, and just break them off one at a time. Or, like I said, flush cutters will cut through the mouse bites pretty easy. Just kind of snap through like that. Or maybe not. Use the pliers. There we go. All right, so we've got our little connector boards. These have some arrows on them. We're going to get into that in a minute. But for the moment, we just need 4 of these. I think I'm going to send 2 sets of these with each 2 boards, or basically 1 set of these per board. And hopefully that'll work out for making larger arrays. Other thing we're going to need to do with the pliers as well is the rails for the main boards are still on these from PCB assembly, so it's up to you to break those off. What you want to do is very carefully with the pair of needle nose pliers or something of that nature, just grab this little end bit and snap it off. If you've got like a glazer's tool or a flatter kind of thing, these are made for breaking glass, I think. You can do the same sort of thing by grabbing the little edge rail and snap that. So these have what they call a V-score along the edge, and those are just meant to sort of snap off. So that's the main board there. I'll do this other one with the pliers here just so you can see. Just make sure if you're using needle nose or little pliers not to scratch the rest of the board. Only grab the little bit that you need. You can kind of start on one side, bend it a little bit, come to the other side, bend it a little bit. It should just come right off. Not to be too ginger, but go slow. Just make sure you don't end up scuffing the board, causing some copper damage or anything like that. So a couple of more things we'll want to talk about. So these have orientation. There's an arrow on each board, or it says up. That is up being that direction. And the boards are going to sort of join together with that same orientation. So if you're doing this way, up goes up is the same. If you're going that way, up goes the same direction. So do not do them this way. That will not work. Or bad things might happen. I don't know. But here's where some fun stuff is going to happen. Actually, I'm going to get 2 more boards ready just to have them. at the end of this, we're going to end up with a 8x8 grid of buttons, and these will end up connected like this. So, oh, nice. We're going to edit this out in post, right? No, we're not, because that's just not how this works. Okay, so we're going to end up with that. But to get there, here's what we want to do, and show you some tricks that I came up with. If you did the MechaTrellis boards, it's the same process, but not really, or it's the same idea. But for the MechaTrellis, I came up with a couple of helper kind of tricks here. So you'll see there's some holes kind of right in there, or down here, or up here. These little headers that we did before are spaced to make a little connection in these holes. So you can sort of line these up and align the boards kind of close. They're still not going to be perfectly lined because there's a little bit of wiggle room there. But those will kind of help you get them at least side to side kind of joined up. Same thing if you're going up and down. There's, again, little holes that these will fit into. Of course, my big hand's in the way. And actually, this is probably confusing. These ones on the outside won't fit, but these ones further in, where the up is right there, will fit. Those are for the sides. These are for the top and bottom. So if you're there. Now, there's another one in the middle there. We'll get to that in just a second. Since you snap these boards apart on, or snap the rails off on the long edge, or sorry, there's not a long edge, they're square. On the top and bottom edge, where the rails were, those edges are going to be a little rough. You might sand those just once with some 220 grit sandpaper or something like that, just to smooth them a little bit if they're really jaggy. But otherwise, don't worry about it. They'll still probably line up just fine. So anyway, so when you're up and down, that's where the little joiner helpers are going to go. But let's do side to side for starters. So the last little bit is there's a joiner that goes right here, but here's where things get fun, or better. We're going to have this little castellated edge PCB work as, instead of using pins or something, we're going to use this little PCB to join the boards together. So let's do our little joiner connector helpers. I don't know what I call these things. And then we're going to need some extra things here. All right, so we've got the joiner PCB is going to go there. The arrow goes up. Again, arrows go the same direction. There's another one where the arrows are facing a different direction. Those are going to be used down here because arrows go the same direction. So arrows always go the same way. So these guys are going to go down there. These are actually different sizes. So if you look at the spacing, the side arrows are a little smaller than the tall arrows, so it's just like a layout problem with the buttons, so we had to squeeze things in there. So they're a little bit different, just be aware of that. But if we come back to our center one, we've got this guy in the center right here, and you get a third little pin guy, and it's going to fit in between this last pin into the holes where it says int. So let me get that. What you can do ahead of time is fit that guy on top of the thing first, and then drop it into the little slots. So this is going to help align your board and the little joiner PCB. So in theory, all we have to do is solder these little joints. Use one of these guys to point with, I guess. We're going to get some solder in there. Even better if I use a soldering iron because you can more contrast. There we go. So we're going to solder in these little castellated pads against the pads on the board, and that's kind of that. As always, make sure your soldering iron is clean, and give it a little solder, give it a little cleanup if you need to, and try to make sure the boards are nice, at least the first two. You don't want to get these things out of whack to start with. If you take a second or a third board, or a spare PCB or something along the bottom edge and or top edge, you can do extra sort of squaring of the boards. So you kind of press those guys together, press this guy together. It should be pretty nicely lined up, right? In theory, it's when it's all said and done, it's going to be a little bit not perfect, but that's what we got to kind of roll with, I guess. So I want to get some solder onto one of these pads and tack this down into place. So the first one's a little tricky. You want to maybe get some solder on one of the pads, then make sure the little joiner PCB is lined up, and you might need to maybe use one of the rails or something to hold that down, sort of in the center. And you want to get the soldering iron up to the edge of the castellated pad and get some solder in there. And if you've got a little on the board, you can sort of drag it in and up. And now that's kind of, at least, looks like it's sort of adhered. You could do one side and then sort of realign things for the other side as well. I might do a second one here just to see. I've got this sort of chisel tip on my iron. I kind of like flipping this over for these castellated pads to get the pointy end kind of in there. And then see if you can get some solder in there. Sometimes it's hard to get it to stick to both parts, but if you kind of heat them up, you don't want to leave the iron on there forever, but enough to get the solder to flow. Alright, so we've got two of those in there. I'm going to pull my little spacer guy out of the way. Looks like, yeah, we're probably alright. So I'm kind of starting with the iron sort of twisted and then sort of turning it, pulling the solder downwards. You could just sort of get some on the bottom and press into it to get the castellated pad to sort of match. And you can kind of hit these a couple times. At least up here on the top connection, make sure you don't drag that into one of the key switch holes. This int hole isn't actually connected to anything. You don't need to solder it, but for completeness, let's go ahead and do it. Something looks a little funky on my connector boards here. There might be a little bit of a bridge there. We're going to look at that in a second. So I've sort of soldered over my connector hole there, but I think everything's good, and I want to try to get the other side soldered on one pad at least. Let's go this way. So I'm just going to kind of load up a bunch of solder and get that in there. You may, when you're doing the other side, you might want to press down on the joiner board and try to do this without rotating it, but maybe just turn me a little bit. So in theory, now I've got that is sort of connected. Feels like it's at least somewhat solidly connected. Until you've got more than 2 points, you might want to leave your little framing PCBs there. I'm going to rotate this because it's going to be easier now that I have one connected anyway. I can go this way. And just make sure that solder flows up into this castellated pad on the joiner PCB. And you might need to stick the iron sort of into that slot a little bit. And make sure you get all 5 of these if you choose to do the int. Go over them once, twice, make sure it looks nice. Okay, so we can take away our little guys like that, take these two out of the way, and now we have boards joined together. So, cool, right? Something was funky when I put those together, and I want to meter this real quick. So you could check each of these every time and make sure, but I'm going to grab the multimeter and check the continuity here. So we got some beeping, and it looked like these two might be bridged, but they are not. So just check the adjacent ones. If you get a little beep, sometimes that's just the ground and voltage capacitor sort of charging up, but if it's got a solid beep, then you know it's kind of got a problem. But you can check the adjacent ones, make sure nothing's kind of funky. On this one, it doesn't look like it's a problem, but I could get in there and just looks like a little bit of the copper from the castellated pad kind of is outside of the thing there. So I'm just going to kind of nudge that a little bit. You could look at that with a loop or something up close and clip some of the extras off there. Double check it again. So no beep, we're good. All right, so let's put this over here. So we got two. I'm going to actually do the other two side by side and then join the two groups together. All right, let's get that. So up is up again. Let's get this next bunch put together. We need one of the up joiners. I've only done this really once, so thanks for bearing with the unrehearsed, unscripted, and completely unedited build video. But that's how we roll around here. So for this one, we could just sort of slide these over, and you've got a nice flat bit there. Press them together. Make sure that looks kind of nice and snug. Use your other little joiners. I need a name. Somebody in the comments tell me a name for these little helpers. And I think that's pretty good. All right, let's try this again. So I want to get this pad, get some solder on there. Then I want to kind of hold the joiner PCB in place and then sort of slide that solder into that castellated connection. Seems to be this is a little bit easier than doing the pins, just the sort of bare pins across these guys and trying to keep those straight when you reheat the solder and everything. So let me know how this works for you. I think it's a little better than the MechaTrellis way. It's close, but it's a little bit easier, I hope. All right, put that side in. Actually, I'm going to do this one over here. Try that again. This is much easier if you can rotate the boards, but once I've got them positioned, I don't want to move them too much. So again, I can kind of slide that solder in, press it against the castellated pad, lift up a little bit. I think it's good. It feels pretty solid. And then I'm going to take my little joiner pin out, solder these other guys. And if this bottom one where the hole is there doesn't get some solder in it, that's totally fine. Again, that connection is not actually, it's not even a connected thing. So since I've got one there and these are kind of holding together okay, I'm going to go ahead and do another one over here. Resolder that first one. Got a lot of solder on that. Oops. And just be careful not to bridge these guys together. If you do feel like you bridged it, you're going to probably want some wick or something like that to soak up some of the excess solder. It's too much, it's okay. But you can sort of just pull some away with the soldering iron too, like that. Okay. We could do another quick test here to make sure the connections are good. So let's put the iron down, grab the meter again, and if you are familiar with the MechaTrellis boards, hopefully, you know, each of these edge connectors are the same things, and they're labeled. So SDA is there and SDA is there, so we should get continuity and SCL. So we could do the same thing across the two boards we just joined. So if we say SCL, SCL, we've got continuity. SDA, we have continuity. Ground, good. VN, good. And not connected, so it doesn't do anything. So that means our solder connections are good between the boards. You could also just double check the adjacent pins for continuity to make sure there's not a short, and it doesn't look like we have one, so everything's cool. Now we can move on to joining the top and bottom ones together. So this is tricky. I don't know. This is not so tricky, but again, look at your orientation. Up is up, up is up. Great. We're going to get our little spacer joiner header guys on the outsides. And I think I'm going to rotate this a little bit this way instead. I'm going to grab just another PCB here just to help square these a little bit. So, because you don't want them a little bit offset like this, just especially if this is going to be the very center, you want that kind of nice and lined up. So you want to eyeball your center point as best you can. If you've got, I'll probably have enough of these that you could join these together in multiple places here. I should have one more. Where did it go? I've lost my helpers. Oh, over there. They were still on the board. So let's put one at this end. And we've got that one at that end. And now, am I even holding the right things together? No, I'm not even doing the right thing. Heh. Worked in rehearsal. No. Let's try this one more time. So we've got, so up is that way right now. But, so we rotated it, push these guys together. We want to use our little joiner guys here, and maybe there, and there. Sort of align them with another PCB or something. Make sure they feel kind of square. Again, look at that. Look at the center point and see if it looks nice and sort of aligned to you. All right. So, you know, I rotated this and I keep telling you up is that way. So I'm going to rotate back here just to keep consistent here for a second. So these are kind of together, but they're a little bit wiggly. So up is still up, right? Up is that way. We've got these other joiners where up is sideways, right? So those are going to go this way and this way. Okay? So let's get this sort of squared up again. Look at your center point, make sure it looks kind of nice. You know, hit it a couple of times, knock it with your fingers. I suppose I've got this like stick vise thing. I could probably squeeze these guys together with that, and that would probably help. But you know, old school and just not using that. Okay, I'm going to take one of these and insert it over here. Again, if you put the little header on the joiner PCB first, that kind of helps hold it in place. And that's cool. Grab one of my little rails here. Oh, I need some solder. Get some solder down. And kind of hold that in place. Get some solder to melt. You're doing good. Yeah, it looks like it's attached. All right. These other ones you could just kind of get your finger in there, I guess. If you do press it with your finger, and this is one of the reasons I'm wearing gloves all the time, is that PCB is going to get real hot real fast. So tweezers, tweezers are a good thing sometimes. You got some blunt tweezers. You could kind of hold that guy in place. Since I moved this after sort of getting the 2 points soldered, I got to kind of heat up both pads and try to move it a little bit. All right, I think I'm in place there. So don't be like me and move it around after it's attached. So let's get this, reposition that over here. Try to do things one at a time here, boss. All right. So I think I may hit these again when I can rotate it and feel better about the position. Let's take this one. So I think what I'm doing here is I'm going to do attach the joiner PCBs to one side, this bottom half, and then we're going to maybe turn this to reposition it, make it easier to solder. All right, this is working. There we go. Okay, so now that's kind of in position. Just doesn't matter what pad you choose here, just sort of choose one. I'll go back to tweezers here because that was maybe good. This very first one may move around a bit, so that's why it helps to maybe hold it in place with some tweezers. All right, maybe. I think so. Again, it's the second one of these I've built, so bear with me. All right, we got a lot of solder there. That's great. That's great. We can take this pin out, put it back over here. Probably a good idea not to try to melt the LEDs and other stuff that's right there. In this case, I am going to rotate this just to make it easier for myself. So easier for me to go side to side here to do these. Grab my tweezers just in case. This one's not entirely straight, but it's close enough that I think it's fine. I got a little solder on that LED. I think it's okay though. Let's check these guys. I'm going to rotate this around the other way to do the other side. I think I'll check these again in a minute. But so still not joined. We just have the one side connected, but I want to rotate this again 180 degrees. And we're this way. You could confirm that your arrows all go the same direction. They do at this point, which is great. Hold on, I want to grab that yet. Since I move this around, I'm going to take my other PCB, set it up down here as a little alignment, kind of press against that, see if my center looks nice and connected, nice and square. What am I looking for there? Then let's solder one of these other guys in. So it's a case of the solder not really want to stick to the pads there very good. At least for this first one, I'm giving it a good press on that joiner PCB so it's not separated. And hopefully that keeps it nice and flat. You could kind of double check that in two places to make sure. I'm happy with that. Looks like these joiner PCBs have some little copper bits kind of hanging off of the castellated pads. You may choose to sort of clean those up a little bit ahead of time. Look at them under a magnifier, double check, and just or just check them after the fact to make sure that they're not bridged somehow. All right, let's move this a little closer. Again, like up here, these guys are really close together with these other pins. Just make sure you don't overload the solder and bridge anything together there. This is fine. All right, feels like we're pretty together. I'm going to take the little helpers away and give this one more little reflow. Flip it around, hit the other side again with a little more solder. Looks like these ones weren't quite connected enough. They're probably fine, but with these little castellated edge pads, you just want to make sure there's solder up into the copper inside those little sort of half holes. All right then, so we have 4 boards connected together. Looking good. Looks nice and sort of flat. Looks like they're kind of a little, I mean, again, every time I do this, they feel like they're not perfectly aligned, but I think it's close enough. You could get crazy with the cheese whiz and sort of try to pull these off and realign them. But I think it's okay. So we did one of these and did one of these ahead of time. So boom, it looks like that, right? Anyway, so this is a finished 8x8 buttons with chalk switches, and these are white palm key switches. White palm keycaps, so the LEDs will shine through. Using chalk silver switches here so that the LEDs don't get discolored by the stem color. I think that's a thing for maybe a forum post or something like that, but just something to be aware of, that the stem color can, at least with a white cap, discolor the LED and sort of make it glow, because the LED is on the top half of the which way is up? The LED is on the top half of the switch. I'll have to do another demo video to show you what that looks like when it's done. But anyway, there's the finished one. There's this. If we were going to make a 128 grid, I may join these together later, but for the process is the same as what we did before. You would just say, okay, this side is up, and you're going to join those two guys here together. So now, a note about addresses for the MechaTrellis boards. This is a go see the original MechaTrellis Monome GitHub repo. There's an image that shows how to set up the addresses. It's not 100% exactly the same, but the address IDs are the same, and you can use the same process here. So here on each of the boards is a little strip of address jumpers, and each one of these is going to set the individual board to an I2C address, and each of the boards needs to have a different address. So that needs to be set up in the code when you flash the firmware for your controller, and that can be different depending on how you decide to do these. I will try to get a picture that shows the or a diagram or something that shows the addresses for a default, sorry, get quotes in there, a default setup, which is like basically A0, this one's nothing, this one's A0, the next one's A1, this one's A2, and then so forth. But kind of depends if you're just doing a 4-board 8x8 or 8-board 8x6 16x8 setup. So that's kind of that. Things still to come are how to do some sort of case situation, and since this is just a build video, we're not really plugging it in and showing you how it works just yet. That would be time for a demo another way. But if all has gone well, this should be nice and flat. The board should be nice and sort of flush together, and everything's cool, right? So, MechaTrellis driver boards. There you go. I think that's all we got for right now. So thanks for watching, and we'll do something again soon.